just going to talk about Game of Thrones. That's how we're going to start it.
Pretty much. I mean, that's the main thing.
All you.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, technicians out there listening to the show? Welcome to the shop. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast. My name is Eitan Mosier. His name is Sam Stompy Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Eitan Mosier. You can find Sam Stompy the Bear, and we have the pleasure of being joined by one of the brightest minds in the community, building one of the best companies out there in the community, the FTN network. Mr. Eliot, Crist, what's going on?
That's a hell of an intro. I appreciate that. I might get you to write my resume next time I need a new job. that was a hell of an intro. I appreciate you.
I got the horns in the background and everything, man. We do this right when we do this.
Now I'm going to actually put horns in the background.
What's going on, guys? I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. So, what we actually had planned for today was we were just going to not talk about football. We were talking about Game of Thrones before we even were going to hop on this podcast. And I feel like, Game of Thrones is going to be what this podcast is about today. I'm actually doing this off the cuff. What we're going to do is we're going to compare some of the guys that I actually want to talk about in fantasy to Game of Thrones characters.
All right.
I'm kidding. We're not doing that at all. What we are going to do is we're going to talk about Kyler Murray, the Arizona Cardinals, and what we should reasonably expect from this offense and from this particular player this season. One of the main draws to Patrick Mahomes just a few years ago, if you were paying attention, was not only the innate talent that Patrick Mahomes had, but the fact that he was being airdropped in the perfect situation. You already had Travis Kelce. You already had Tyreek Hill. The weapons were there. You had one of the best coaches, one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL under Andy Reid. And we just expected that offense, after seeing what Alex Smith did in that offense, to just go bananas the moment they had the talent at quarterback that was Patrick Mahomes. What we're finding is, if you're looking at situation, for the most part, outside of maybe offensive line, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But if you're looking at situation, the Arizona Cardinals have one of the best situations in the NFL with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins in that offense when it comes to the sheer amount of weapons that Kyler Murray is going to be able to throw to this season. We already saw what he could do as a rookie. 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, I believe. And I'm not sure how many yards on the ground, but I think it was over 500, something in the 600 range. So if he was able to do that without a DeAndre Hopkins, without a deep threat, as his ADOT over the last season was only about 7.3, I believe, which was not one of the highest in the league. Derek Carr range is 8 yards per attempt. If he gets somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, who has always averaged over double digits yards per attempt throughout his entire career, I think 10.7, something in that range, was his yards per attempt last season. Are we going to see more of a vertical passing game rather than the horizontal air raid we saw under Cliff Kingsbury last year?
Well, I mean, it can only go up, right? I mean, they went from they were supposed to be the air raid, and then they became the horizontal raid, right? With just kind of bubble screens and not pushing the ball down the field. DeAndre Hopkins is certainly going to do that. Whenever you get a top-end talent, it's going to help everyone else as well, right? Because they start going down the list of Christian Kirk's no longer going up against the best corner. He's going up against the second best and down the list. Kenyon Drake also fits that offense incredibly well. Kingsbury's really creative getting the running back the ball. And at the end of the day, with Kyle Murray, in terms of fantasy, he runs. Stoffy and I talked about this in a podcast the other night. The Konami code, rushing quarterbacks, this is what you want. Like, there's a reason why Kyle Murray, or Kyler Murray, unfortunately at FTN, we have someone on the staff named Kyle Murray, and I talk to him so much that I now mix them up. They look slightly different and have slightly different skill sets, but I digress. Kyler Murray has such a high fantasy floor that he didn't even play particularly well last year. It's year 2 in a system that fits him well. The defense is not going to be good. The pace is going to be up. He's going to run, and he gets a top receiver in the NFL. I mean, it seems locked and loaded for him to be a top 5 quarterback bearing an injury. And the sacks and the offensive line is definitely a concern. And while it'll definitely end some drives, the other thing it does is, they break the pocket. Now he's scrambling. he's got an opportunity to pick up yards on the ground. Or Kyler Murray is really, really good when the play breaks down and making plays down the field, maybe throwing a 30-yard pass downfield to DeAndre Hopkins, a guy he trusts in 50-50 situations now. These are all things that can happen with bad offensive line as well. It doesn't necessarily kill your fantasy output. It's not great for real-life football, but like Deshaun Watson's played behind a garbage offensive line his entire career, and it leads to him running more. So, frankly, it could be a good thing. So, Kyler Murray is set to crush fantasy football this year. He's probably QB3, right? I mean, it's Mahomes and Lamar that are right there, and then I would say the next three for me are Watson, Dak, and Murray. Pick your order.
Again, that would probably be my one rebuke to that. I would probably go Dak Prescott in that, but I can see where you're coming from with Kyler Murray. Sam, let me ask you. I mean, yeah, Kyler Murray, if he's behind an offensive line that's going to cause him to run more, that's going to be better for his fantasy owners. But, I mean, is he the type of guy that can stay healthy doing that? Is he the type of guy that can kind of Lamar Jackson-esque escape pressure and not be hit in the way that keeps him standing up? And if he is going to be there for 16 games this season, I mean, Eliot Crist just said QB3. Is that the ceiling? Can Kyler Murray potentially end QB1?
Potentially, sure. If Lamar Jackson somehow doesn't run for 1,000 yards, which is basically all but guaranteed at this point. I just don't. He just doesn't run as much as Lamar does. And they're not really a lot of designed runs for him, I don't believe. So I guess for me, he's Lamar Jackson-esque in that he avoids contact and he knows, I mean, he's a small dude, so he needs to avoid contact. I do. There is some concern with that offensive line, but obviously it would have been far worse if it was like Josh Rosen back there instead of Kyler Murray, because I don't know. He led the league in sacks, right? Last year.
If he didn't lead it was very close to it.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess the other concern for me is the pace stats. We thought this offense was going to be fast, and meaning they would score a ton, but they were still the fourth fastest in seconds per play. So I guess the concern there is how much faster can they go, and how much is that going to equate to more fantasy points? I completely understand with DeAndre Hopkins why we like Kyler Murray. But yeah, I mean, those are two just general concerns. I think Kyler Murray in this offense, a second year, Cliff Kingsbury in the NFL, a second year. I think they'll get more comfortable and they will be able to score more and produce more. But those are a couple things I think about. Is Kyler's not Lamar Jackson in that he's not going to run for probably 800 plus yards. He might, but it didn't seem like it. Like that's what they were trying to do last year. And then obviously I don't know how much faster they can play because they played pretty fast last season. But
one really interesting point, and this is how you plug something, is using the FTN pace tool. The Arizona Cardinals averaged the least amount of points per snap in the NFL last year.
All right. And despite playing,
is that Chip Kelly-esque? Is there a fear that maybe we're going in that direction rather than, what we thought this was going to be?
I mean, it's possible, but if you go that, like, you can't be worse than last.
So you would expect positive regression, especially playing at that speed and with a better receiver. And a good running back the entire season.
All right, so
I mean, I think that's really going to help them. And
that's fair. That,
like, the positive regression of the offense. If you looked at it was a horizontal rate. They can push the ball down the field more. It should lead to more scoring opportunities. And at the end of the day, like does he have QB1 upside? I just don't think you're touching Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, especially if we get Patrick Mahomes of the last 4 weeks where he started running 6 or 7 times a game.
A healthy Patrick Mahomes, which we didn't have half of last season.
Yeah, so QB3 is probably his ceiling, QB 7 or 8 is probably his floor if he plays all 16 games.
Yeah, I like how you put that. It's not so much the issue that we're worried about where Kyler can finish. It's you're going to have to put him above these two other guys that we think are just going to go absolutely crazy this season, which is very, very understandable.
I mean, Patrick Mahomes is 3 to 4 touchdowns is the expected outcome of Patrick Mahomes.
300 yards and 3-4 touchdowns.
That's ridiculous.
Like it's a joke. Like I'm saying that, and you guys aren't going to like push back on me, right? Like his over under each week is 3. It's absurd.
You get 270 yards and 2 touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. You're kind of disappointed in that output.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson, you're expecting to run for 80 plus yards,
throw for 200.
Get a touchdown, and he'll only throw for 200 yards because he only throws 18 times a game, but he's completing like 16 of them. So he's going to have some touchdown regression, but that just means there's going to be more volume.
Yep.
Like they're both cheat codes. Now, the only reason they're not cheat codes completely in fantasy is because the quarterback position, is so deep, and you have to spend that capital and the opportunity cost. But Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in like super flex leagues, they just give you such an advantage.
Yeah, we haven't. I would say we haven't had anybody like that since maybe Cam in 20. When did he win the MVP?
Yeah, that's kind of the performance you're looking at, where I think he was averaging like 27.5 fantasy points per game that year. Like it's Stompy and I talked about it yesterday. The rushing upside of Lamar Jackson we're legit looking at 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Like that's well within the range of outcomes for him.
Yeah,
that's 22 points
before lifting a finger, really. And that's
three
a normal game.
3 touchdowns and 300 yards is 20 points. Like it's so hard to catch the rushing upside.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's where the offenses are going in the NFL. I mean, Josh Allen is a starting running or quarterback in the NFL because
you got it right the first time.
Yeah, the first time
I started running back. See, that might be the case with him. Lamar Jackson threw 5 touchdowns in his first week last year, and he's like, and I have this shirt from RotoWire, by the way, not too bad for a running back. Anyway, Carson Wentz even is like can do RPO type stuff. Eliot said we talked yesterday. I mean, Gardner Minshew has like a 40-yard upside every game. Drew Lock even, and we had talked about him too. He's he's not a runner per se, but he's mobile enough to get you 250 yards on the ground.
Days of the statues, and this is probably why Josh Rosen's in trouble. One of many reasons Josh Rosen might be in trouble.
Yeah.
But the days of the statue quarterbacks seem to be numbered because a quarterback who's mobile just adds so much more dimension to your. I mean, Joe Burrow is very athletic. He's got rushing upside. Tua, if his ankles and hips work, has rushing upside.
I mean,
it's almost a prerequisite.
Justin Fields next year.
Trevor Lawrence is a hell of an athlete too.
There you go.
It's almost a prerequisite to being a really sought after prospect at this point. You need to have that mobility, like you were saying, because NFL teams are trying to shift. So it'll be interesting to see, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we see just an entire NFL full of this. And if that somehow shifts back into some other thing that we're not expecting, some other archetype, some other type of skills that teams are using to differentiate themselves. Because if you don't change, you're essentially losing your grip on the top of the league anyway. So it'll be fun to see where this goes. But before we completely leave Arizona, let's talk about, I guess, the guys on the other side of that connection. Obviously, the weapons and the type of offense that Murray is in is going to mean good things for him, but doesn't necessarily mean good things for everyone involved. Christian Kirk, we thought, was going to have a breakout season this year before the trade of DeAndre Hopkins. Whether or not he's still as relevant as we want him to be is definitely up in the air. That's a question I'm going to be asking you in a second. And, of course, you have to look at DeAndre Hopkins. For the last pretty much his entire career outside of his first season, he's had 125 targets plus. And 125 is the low end of where we see DeAndre Hopkins in terms of targets. He's usually in the 140s. He's had over 190 in a season. So with these 4 wide receiver sets, yes, we expect a lot of play volume, but I mean, realistically, with Larry Fitzgerald still in the fold, along with Christian Kirk, do we expect DeAndre Hopkins' numbers to come down just a little bit?
So one of the big things that I talked to Stompy about yesterday was, and I know people don't necessarily listen to both podcasts, but I just want to make sure that people don't think I'm just repeating myself, is that 82% of receivers who changed teams prior to last year in a 5-year period had worse numbers after changing teams because the chemistry takes time. Now, the counter argument is DeAndre Hopkins might be the exception to that rule based on the fact that he's put up monster numbers with Brock Osweiler and Brandon Weeden and Ryan Fitzpatrick, and probably could do it with Eliot Crist too. But in terms of the other ancillary pieces, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald will have a good week 1, will have an okay week 2, and then he'll just be old and dusty the rest of the year. Christian Kirk, I think, is going to be a guy that is helped by DeAndre Hopkins in real football, but in terms of his target share upside, it's going to be tough for, I mean, if DeAndre Hopkins takes over that role long term, it's going to be tough for him not to eat into Christian Kirk's targets. So I know that in one point in Dynasty, he was viewed as a future wide receiver 1. I think that's really going to be hard for him to ever hit that ceiling. I think he's probably a wide receiver 3 with weekly wide receiver 2 upside.
Well, if Larry Fitzgerald would die, why won't you die, Larry Fitzgerald?
Because him and Frank Gore are eternal.
I actually heard the car. This is changing the topic from Hopkins, but I heard a theory today, and I thought it was really interesting. I'd like to get your guys' take on it, if that's cool. So obviously, coronavirus, it could cancel the season. It could impact the season. No matter what happens, the season's going to look a little bit different, right? I mean, I've heard rumors that they might play in Germany. We'll see whatever happens, right? But one of the things we've seen in certain sports is players opt out, right? Like Avery Bradley opted out in basketball because of his son. I think there are a few baseball players who opted out. And they're people with pre-existing conditions. And it's known that if you have a pre-existing condition, you're more susceptible. So I thought about, like, Patrick Peterson has diabetes, right? Mark Andrews has diabetes. There's John Brown has sickle cell anemia. Do you guys think that that's like something worth monitoring or talking about? Or is that just digging too deep? Because, like, I don't want to get into guys' medical history, but I do think that pre-existing conditions are, if it makes your legit life at risk and they feel that way, they could easily opt out.
So I live in St. Louis, and the Cardinals closer just opted out of the season because he has diabetes. I absolutely think it's something that will have to be monitored, especially in the linemen, because I mean, they're superhuman athletes, but they are not in the healthiest of weight ranges, and because we know it's not all muscle. So those guys are gonna, I think, get hit harder than anybody, especially because they're playing in the trenches constantly. So they're just breathing on each other. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how, like, altitude affects sickle cell anemia. Right. How, I mean, what do we think COVID's going to do?
Yeah. I just think it's worth something if you're looking in your drafts, right?
Yeah.
Like Mark Andrews is a great example. That's a risk factor that I don't think anyone has talked about and is worth, I think, at least asking the question on. I don't know if the answer matters, or, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. I'm stumbling over myself a little bit here, but because I'm trying to be respectful of people's health conditions, but
100%. But yeah, I mean, I know, like, the thing for me is you're getting opt-outs from, like, Oladipo, I believe it isn't playing for the Pacers in Orlando, and now I have to believe that I think Harden and Westbrook both have tested positive. It hasn't been confirmed for Harden, but he was one of the players that was held back from going to Orlando right away. So I just don't know how multiple players opting out doesn't somehow, like, hinder what the NFL is or hinder the NFL season in some way.
Yeah, I mean, look, athlete or not, millions of dollar contract or not, at the end of the day, you have to take care of your health. That money doesn't matter if you're not around to be able to do anything with it. And Ike Taylor famously never played at Mile High, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He always was out when the Steelers would come up to Mile High, specifically for the reason that, I mean, his sickle cell anemia didn't do well with the altitude. And that's much less severe than something that COVID would present. I would say just one thing. There was a CBA signed very, very recently. So what is in the CBA that might lead, players to, I don't know, maybe think about their futures in a different way. I don't know if there's if opting out, for example, would maybe do the same thing as sitting out would in terms of not giving them that year of eligibility if they're on their rookie contracts that allows them to then become a free agent the next season. So there's a lot of things, I guess, in that document as well that are going to kind of play a role if players do decide to start opting out and start, trying to focus on things that are outside of football. It'll just be interesting how this plays out.
By the way, James Harden just showed up to Orlando 4 minutes ago.
So what? All right, fine.
Now,
Well, he
apparently
does
those
go
are
to a
false
lot of
reports.
strip clubs, though. I
does.
learned that yesterday.
That was the best nugget of the whole podcast.
Yeah, but I learned that yesterday that he goes to a lot of high-end strip clubs. So he's putting himself at risk.
Yeah, we're just not going to talk about correlation and causation here. We're just gonna continue along with that. But yeah, I think a lot of things are going to change out in Arizona, and it'll be fun to see how that happens. But you mentioned Dak Prescott, and by mentioning Dak Prescott, we mentioned Dak Prescott's weapons in the same way. Amari Cooper, one of them. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, the other one of those. Is Michael Gallup kind of the lost boy here? Can we really have another 3 wide receiver set in the same way that we saw from the Rams just a few years ago, where all guys are valuable? Or are we going to see some growing pains for the rookie, or maybe a little bit of a pullback from the targets that were going to Michael Gallup going into the 2020 season, assuming we have a season?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I do think they find a way to play, even if it's delayed. But
you can say things on this podcast. It's fine. It's about money. We get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. They're going to do everything they can to make sure they don't lose multi-billions of dollars, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of CeeDee Lamb, I think he's in trouble year one. I think Lamb he was an elite prospect from a NFL standpoint. Good Lord, I would not want to try to cover that trio. But, the fact that he's coming in as a rookie without all the offseason stuff and is coming in and going to be the third wide receiver, I think that's going to be tough for him to have fantasy success right away. I don't think people have given Michael Gallup as much credit as he deserves either. His first 2 years have been nothing short of spectacular. I think that it's obviously amazing for Dak. Right? It probably hurts Zeke a little bit because they really should be throwing the football more as well. Amari Cooper is a boomer bust player anyway. I don't think it's going to change that much. He's still going to have some monster games. He's still going to have some no-show games. I actually think Michael Gallup is going to hang on to his role, and you'll see CeeDee Lamb more in the Randall Cobb type role. And obviously Cobb went over 800 yards last year. I think he finished 8th overall in yards per target. But I think Lamb's going to take a little while to adjust, and he's probably looking at 70 targets this year, but I think Gallup's looking at closer to 90, 95.
I 100% agree with that. I think Gallup is far and away the best value at a wide receiver for the Cowboys. Went over 1,000 yards last season in his second season, so definitely had his breakout. I mean, there's nothing to point to me that he's not the deep outside threat with that speed and his ability to do the 50-50 thing, how athletic he is.
It's kind of crazy because that wasn't really his game in college.
I mean, he's
a really good route runner.
Yeah, and for some reason he can go up and get it every once in a while. So depending on where Gallup's going, and I don't know exactly where he's going, but he just seems like the best value right now. And it'll be interesting to see what CeeDee Lamb becomes there, because was Amari franchised?
Yeah, this was my next point. Amari was actually signed to a 5-year, $100 million contract with the Dallas Cowboys. I always like to talk about contracts on this podcast. Long-time listeners of the show would know that. But the catch is Amari Cooper could potentially be a free man in 2022, or the Dallas Cowboys really, I guess, on this side of things, would be the free party in this situation. They have an out in 2022, so Amari Cooper could not be part of that team. Weirdly enough, that just so happens to be around the time that Michael Gallup would need a contract extension. I believe he would need one at the end of the season. And then you have CeeDee Lamb that's pretty much coming into his own, and they're going to have to make the 5th-year extension decision at that point as well. Is this all a grand master plan to eventually replace Amari Cooper with CeeDee Lamb and have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup be the future of that wide receiver core in Dallas? Or was the $100 million contract just the all-in win now? Jerry's just finally going to get his ring again.
I think it's really hard to predict this year of the NFL. Predicting 3 years from now gets very, very difficult. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make in Dynasty.
Yeah.
It's like, 3 years from now, this guy could be a starter. You know how hard it is to predict what a roster looks like in 3 years? To your point, though, everything you just mentioned is within the range of outcomes. You know, they could move on from Gallup. They could move on from Cooper. They could decide that Lamb isn't everything that they thought he was going to be. They could say, listen, we gave Dak all this money. We're just going to invest in his weapons. Zeke, we're just going to work with Tony Pollard, although at that point it's probably some new 4th-round rookie. Tyron Smith's contract he's going to be older then. Zach Martin's going to be older then. Like, there's so many pieces to that puzzle that can change that I think it's really difficult to tell. What I think is very obvious is that this team has built their entire offense around Dak Prescott and throwing the football. And one point to Stompy's point earlier, when we talked about offensive linemen, it's not all muscle. Tyron Smith would like a word, considering the fact he wears a knee brace around his arm.
Okay,
Tyron Smith is all muscle.
Look, I don't want to start fights with these gigantic people. Okay, like, don't be saying things that'll get me in trouble. Listen, I understand they are monster people, and they scare the hell out of me. But the fact remains is when, like, Mark Schlereth and there was another offensive lineman that just retired too, that lose like 100 and some odd pounds. It's like, okay. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Lamb, so I will always and forever say this: I do not draft rookie wide receivers in rookie drafts unless it's like
every year except
value.
for last year.
Well, no, every year, but it's draft.
Yeah, I'm messing with you.
I know you are. Shut up. But no, like, we always get players that are N'Keal Harry or Corey Davis or Michael Gallup last year, whose value takes a gigantic hit because everybody expects these superstars in college to produce right away. But the fact remains is that I shouldn't say barely any, but a significantly little few. I can't. Whatever.
It's definitely not little. It's not significantly little. I mean, there are certain parts about you that are significantly little, but
just
all the world knows.
Oh man, I appreciate you for setting that one.
That was a softball, but no, like there aren't that many rookie wide receivers that have a year one breakout. It just doesn't happen very often. It's been happening more recently, I think, because of the development of the slot wide receiver. But still, I'm not taking. The one thing I will say is that three wide receivers start for a team at this point. Yeah.
Right, like the third wide receiver not being a starter is a myth at this point.
Right. Correct.
Oh yeah. Ever since wide receiver ones have been kind of diminished over time in terms of their target load, we've been seeing more out to the running back and more to that third wide receiver.
I think 11 and 12 personnel are pretty standard, but
Yeah.
11 personnel, especially now.
How many fullbacks are left in the NFL?
So you have the one in Baltimore.
And the one in
I
San
mean, the
Francisco.
best player in the
San
NFL,
Francisco.
Kyle Juszczyk, of course. According to Booger.
You and Booger McFarland believe that.
According to Booger.
Oh, bug. But yeah, I mean, so that's my spiel on rookie wide receivers is usually you can get some of these really good wide receivers at a discount the next year or even the following year when they don't break out in their second year, because there's a significant number that break out in their third year as well. So
A perfect representation of this point is look at what Cortland Sutton was last year in terms of what you could have spent to get what we assume will be a top 15 receiver going into the season.
Michael Gallup, DJ Moore, DJ
Absolutely.
Chark. I mean, DJ Moore's a little bit iffy because he performed in the second half. DJ Chark, you could add for basically free because he didn't do anything in year one. Michael Gallup had a terrible, I shouldn't say terrible, but he had a forgettable year in his rookie season. You get these guys for a second rounder when you used a first on them, and all of a sudden these guys break out in year two or year three, and you have you got them at tremendous value. So that's why I always recommend to buy wide receivers or draft older wide receivers, because you can get those guys for cheaper in year two or year three.
Speaking of dynasty wide receivers, why is Allen Robinson, who's the same age as Kenny Golladay, considered old, but Kenny Golladay is considered young?
I don't understand that. It makes no sense. And the funny thing is, Kenny Golladay has a lot more competition than Allen Robinson probably has.
Why Allen Robinson isn't like a top 12 dynasty wide receiver?
I think both of them should be.
Yes, I do.
Kenny
I do
Golladay,
think both
but
of them should be, but
Allen Robinson should be.
I think the point is they're more similar than not.
I've been in too many startups stuck in quarantine for the last 150 days. And every time Kenny Golladay goes off the board in the third, and there's Allen Robinson going off the board in the fifth, and I just don't understand the difference.
It would be quarterback. That's the only argument that people are going to give you. But again, I would just counter that with competition.
The rebuttal would be, well, he's performed with terrible Mitch Trubisky and terrible Blake Bortles in two of the seasons. And really, he's only had 3 healthy seasons in his career. So,
I mean, the target share and the workload is there for him to be a monster. And this is not a knock on Kenny Golladay at all. I just Allen Robinson seems like one of the most underrated wide receivers.
Can you imagine if he had a competent quarterback?
We're not even talking about a good quarterback, just competent.
Yeah, seriously.
Phillip Rivers, honestly. Phillip Rivers.
I would call him the Hall of Very Good. So
that's what I'm saying. Not like an elite talent, but somebody that's been decent for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, give him Ben Roethlisberger in the Antonio
he was
Brown
in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's over. It's over if he's in Pittsburgh. That's not a thought I want to think of because the Steelers would just run.
But yeah, so it's one of those things where if you can perform, and this is why DeAndre Hopkins is probably a little bit immune to that I guess we'll call it theory that wide receivers perform worse in year one with a new team, because DeAndre Hopkins has performed, and Eliot brought this up yesterday too, has performed with Brock Osweiler and Brandon Whedon and who has he had throughout his career until Deshaun Watson, and he was still putting up numbers.
And then also to that point, I mean, until pretty recently, I would say in the last 6, 7 seasons or so, how often do we even see one of these huge wide receivers in their prime switch teams? I mean, it's not usually the ones you would think that are the superstars that are often switching teams as often as we've seen recently with, the Diggs trade and so on and so forth. Like, we usually see secondary, tertiary receivers switching teams, and the guy that is the main guy there for a good 4 or 5 seasons before we see anything happen. So I think that we're just seeing kind of a new age of what the NFL is doing. They're trying to be a little bit more like basketball, and we saw that in the Brock Osweiler trade in terms of just being more modern about how they run their organizations.
Yeah, the Brock Osweiler trade is just so ridiculous. I
Money,
don't
man.
know. I don't know
Money,
what
money,
the
money.
Texans are doing. I just had a random thought. I'm going to change the subject abruptly here. Are David Njoku and OJ Howard basically Vance McDonald 2.0?
I think Njoku is more likely to be Vance McDonald than OJ Howard is. One of the frustrating things about OJ Howard is like there wasn't really a flaw in his profile other than his market share, right? But he played with multiple NFL wide receivers. Like he was one of the better blocking guys coming in that PFF had ever graded. He's a freak athlete. I mean, 6'6", 4'9". Anytime he gets the ball in his hands, he's done big things. I think a change of scenery would do a lot of good for him. I also think that the tight end position it's a position where, I think they've done a lot of studies on why you should never draft tight ends in the first round, and it's because they basically aren't good until their fourth year anyway, and by the time they're good, they play for somebody else.
Exactly. Their rookie contract is not the time that generally you want to own these guys. That said, we've kind of been beat over the head with that over the last couple of seasons with Mark Andrews, with George Kittle, and with all these young guys coming in and dominating early. I mean, do you think that is a thing that we're going to see more often?
That seems landing spot dependent to me, though, because George Kittle landed in a place that didn't have any prominent wide receivers, and with a brand new quarterback, basically. No, it was a brand new quarterback. And the same with Andrews, where Andrews, who was he competing with 2 years ago? That was going. I mean, John Brown had his first half surge, but other than that,
he wasn't even the tight end that the Ravens wanted. They wanted Hayden Hurst.
I know. So it really depends.
Talk about bad process, by the way. Don't draft 26-year-old rookie tight end.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea.
But he played two sports. Maybe he's Bo Jackson. But you saw it. I believe the same. Is that the same year as Evan Ingram? Yes.
Yep. OJ Howard is the same year as Evan Ingram.
Yeah. So Evan Ingram got his chance because Sterling Shepard was out for an extended period. OBJ broke his ankle in week 4. So Evan Ingram had a breakout in his rookie season. So we've been spoiled, I guess, in terms of rookie year tight ends, but I think that's extenuating circumstances where those three guys just landed in a spot where they garnered targets because of either injury or lack of other pass catchers.
And by the way, that's probably going to happen with TJ Hawkinson if Marvin Jones stays healthy with Kenny Golladay, right? Yep. It's a very similar situation with OJ Howard. Obviously, there's much more competition now in Tampa at the tight end position. And Noah Fant, who's everybody's boy. Whew, that's a crowded wide receiver core.
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. Like, what is his target share upside?
That's a good.
First of all, what is the Broncos' target upside? Like, how many pass attempts do we realistically expect this team to have? Because they kind of do have a two-headed monster at running back too now.
Monster is that's like the little kid that says there's a monster under their bed. Monster is not a real phrase with those two running backs in Denver right now.
They're very good running backs.
No, I actually think Melvin Gordon's a little underrated. Philip Lindsay is definitely solid, but they should throw a lot. I mean, Drew Lock is a downfield passer, and they've set him up nicely. Right?
Speed, so much speed.
Yeah, like they're all about getting vertical. That's what the whole offense is about.
Yep.
A point that as me and Stompy actually had gone over in previous episodes was that say what you want to say about Drew Lock. Say what you want to say about his accuracy issues. Say what you want to say about his ability to process information quickly. With the receiving core that the Broncos have, people are going to get separation very, very quickly. He is not going to have that many difficult throws to make. So, I mean, I think that, again, regardless of what you really think of him as a quarterback, there's just room for growth because of the situation.
No, the Broncos did something that only a few teams do, and I don't know why this is very difficult. But they said, we drafted a young quarterback. We're going to surround him with as much talent as we can to try to help him grow. And we are going to make sure that that talent fits his skill set.
Well, and
So
not
if he
to
doesn't work, there is no, oh man, we held him back. It's we gave him all the tools. And if Drew Lock doesn't work 2 years from now and they're a bad team, they're drafting a new rookie quarterback that's set up with all the tools that he could ever want.
Yeah, I think they also drafted with the Kansas City Chiefs in mind, because you can only slow down the Chiefs so much before you have to start scoring points. And while the Broncos have actually been okay at slowing them down, and by slowing them down, I say 27, 28 points allowed. And they need an offense that can score with them. And they're trying to match that there with, elite speed everywhere. You have Hardman, Watkins, though he's not as speedy now, but Tyreek Hill, and then Travis Kelce's a great athlete at tight end. So I think that's what it seems is going on in Denver, is in order to combat the Kansas City Chiefs, they know they need to score more, which means they need that deep ball speed to keep up.
Yeah, I think the entire division kind of did that as well. I think you can see the same thing with what the Raiders did in their draft. Again, going for speed. That might just be the ghost of Al Davis, but it's also just them trying to counter what they have to face in the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's really nice of you to think the Raiders have a plan.
I didn't say they had a plan. I just said they drafted the fastest guy on the board.
Yeah. Sometimes you look at what they're doing, you're like, this doesn't make sense.
Is Mariota?
Let's
talk about this. Is John Gruden a good coach?
In what year?
Today, right now.
1999. 1999,
John
he was
Gruden's
with
known
the
as
Times.
a QB whisperer. Why? Like, how does that happen? Right? Like, remember when Marvin Lewis, Hugh Jackson was a guy that Hugh Jackman was a hell of an actor for Wolverine,
Yes,
but Hugh
Wolverine.
Jackson was the guy that all the media was always like, oh, this guy is the guy you want teaching your quarterbacks. Like, where did that come from? Like, every time they have a quarterback, he's no good. Like, I just don't understand how you get that reputation. I wish that was like a thing in other professions where you could just, everything you do never works. But people are like, oh man, that guy is great at what he does.
I feel like as children, we kind of learned this, right? When you ran for this whatever class president, when you were a kid, you realized very quickly.
What are you, a nerd?
Popularity contest.
You're a nerd.
We're talking about fantasy football, Sam. We're all nerds.
That's fair.
I would like to say that I'm super cool. I have multiple friends.
I have several of those friends on the internet.
Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, I think, is there a parallel, Eliot, between the situation in Dallas with CeeDee Lamb and the situation in Denver with Jerry Jeudy in terms of whether or not these guys are even going to have room to become the things that we thought they would?
I think Jerry Jeudy's got a clearer path to more targets than CeeDee Lamb does. Mm-hmm. I think KJ Hamler's never going to be a volume guy. He's going to be a splash play guy.
Cole Hardman.
I think that Cortland Sutton and he are probably going to be 1A and 1B. But Sutton is a hell of a player. But Jerry Jeudy has that one skill set that just translates so well, and that's separation, route running, whatever you want to call it. The man is open all the time. All the time. And that is, in my opinion, super helpful. So I think he's actually in a better spot than Lamb is. But I definitely, neither one of them were the ideal perfect landing spot.
Well, and so you have to think that Jeudy kind of takes on the Emmanuel Sanders role, that flanker type of wide receiver. Hamler will play out of the slot in 3 wide receiver sets. Or no, he would play on the outside in 3 wide receiver sets. Never mind. But he would be good in the slot too. But yeah, so you have to think that it's CeeDee Lamb is competing with 2 wide receivers who have already put up good numbers in their careers. And whereas like Judy has Sutton, and then I mean, I guess Fant showed up at times last season.
Fant also had like 2 or 3 plays that accounted for a majority, a lot of his yards. Right? He had like a 70-yard touchdown, an 80-yard touchdown.
And most of his production was before Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Well, they also not correlation causation, Aton. They threw a lot less. Okay.
Hey, I'm not worried about the details here. I just present
Context.
the thing to get people.
We talked about this last night. You just pick a stat out of a hat and you just say that it's a fact, and you're not allowed to apply context to it.
Context doesn't mean anything anymore.
I love that. All right, so that is going to be the end of our discussion. That kind of meandered a little bit today. We are now going to get into what
those are always the funnest conversations, man. Just
Absolutely.
meandering.
Absolutely. And what the people want is a diagnostic. And so we are going to do one, and we are going to get into the roster of...
I forgot his name.
Good job, Sam. Yay!
It's Jake Earl. Sorry. It's Jake Earl at the Jake
in
Earl.
our league. Jake, man. You have to like...
I forgot who it was until just now. I figured it out. Shut up, Akon. I'm keeping all of this shit in because this is how candid podcasts are done.
Before we even get into this, do we know what this league is? Like, is it a 7 quarterback league? Like, what are we doing here, Sam? Do we have the rules?
I sent it to you.
I see nothing.
I even have it, to be honest.
10-team, 1 QB, non-tight end premium.
Oh, okay. It's underneath the picture. All right, so it is a 10-team, 1 quarterback, no TE premium. Start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex, 6 point per passing TD, half-point PPR league. Again, it's a 1 quarterback league, so I really wonder why we should even talk about quarterbacks. So we're not going to start there. We're going to go straight into running back. And on this team, we have Kareem Hunt, Ronald Jones, Matt Breida, Benny Snell, Chase Edmonds, and Jerick McKinnon. And while I will say that I am terrified for your running back group as a whole, I do want to spend some time going over these specific guys here. Kareem Hunt.
No, goddamn it.
Sam and I are we're about to lose it on Kareem Hunt. So, Eliot, you're going to be the only one talking about Kareem Hunt. But Ronald Jones, Matt Breida, Chase Edmonds. Obviously, Chase Edmonds has extra competition in his backfield with the Arizona Cardinals draft this year. Matt Breida, we don't necessarily know if him and Jordan Howard's going to be starting. And Ronald Jones has Keyshawn Vaughn to contend with. Do either of these guys have any type of value that you want to hold on to in a dynasty league?
Do we like this person whose team this is? Like, I don't want to be
We
mean.
do, but I don't think anybody
say.
really cares if you shit on their team.
You got to say what you got to say.
I don't like this. Looks like a 14-team league.
It does.
Like
there's need to be more depth here.
He has 4 real assets here, and Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and DK Metcalf. Right? He's got a big 3 wide receiver. It does look like he has 105, 106, and 108. So he's got a real
101, 106, and 108.
Oh, well, then that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right. So his running backs are really Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, or DeAndre Swift, and Cam Akers.
You think that the top 5 picks won't be running backs? That's my concern with 106 there.
I mean, that's a real possibility. Lamb and Judy, I mean, he can start 5 wide receivers, right?
Yes. 3 wide receivers, 2 flex.
So, I mean, Lamb and Judy aren't like the worst consolation prizes.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and I think it really depends on what you feel you need here. And I mean, with the running backs,
he's in trouble at running back. Like, Breida's got some upside this year, right? Kareem Hunt has some upside. He was like RB13. He's got the pass catching upside.
Yeah.
I don't know his long-term viability. He's going to be a year-to-year player.
This is also half point PPR too, so that hurts him.
I mean, I'm a huge Darren Waller guy, but he's probably got the worst quarterbacks in the league. He's probably got the worst running backs in the league. And he has highly volatile wide receivers. Clyde Edwards-Helaire does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
If one of the picks can be one of Dobbins or Akers, that's going to help him a lot. But he's going to struggle again this next season.
I mean, we obviously all know how I feel about running backs. I mean, Kareem Hunt as your RB3, great. Kareem Hunt as your potential RB1, horrendous, especially in a 10 team league. So
that's the thing I'm having a lot of trouble getting over is that this is a 10-team league.
Well, so
at a base level, you need a starter at running back. Let's just start there.
I wonder if this is
also taxi squad of JJ Arcega-Whiteside and Dante Pettis
in a 10-team league.
Ouch for you, bro.
Ouch for you, bro.
Yeah, like that's. Remember were you guys Dante Pettis people last year?
Oh no, this was not a Dante Pettis podcast.
Yeah, it was when he climbed up into like wider the round 6. I was like, this. I'm not sure what's happening here, guys.
That's the will of Matt Waldman, I think.
Well, it's also one of the things that happens is someone likes Dante Pettis in the 11th round, and then so someone needs to top him.
Yeah,
and we keep playing story topper, and then all of a sudden it's like, guys, we're getting out of control here, and it's not a Dante Pettis thing. It's we see this across the board.
Who's the guy that has had that happen to them? Do you think this year?
Honestly, I think there have been less drafts this year, which has caused it to happen less, if that makes sense. I do think Robert, and I love Robert Woods. I think he's climbing into scary high territory now.
Do you see my eyeballs, Eliot, Crist? Do you see my eyeballs?
I don't think he cares about your eyeballs.
Why?
I mean, he's seen more.
I was giving you the wide-eyed look.
I love Robert Woods, but I mean, you could get him in round 8.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, and now he goes in round 5. He's reaching the right price, but like if he climbs up to wider to round 3, Darius Slayton and Deontay Johnson are two guys that have really climbed to where they're much more priced at their ceiling than they are. They don't really give you much upside at that price point.
This is why fantasy football is so volatile, is because, like you said, I like Deontay Johnson entering the season because obviously I talk about the second-year wide receivers or entering the offseason. I talk about second-year wide receivers and what he was able to do with probably the worst, maybe the second worst if we look at Carolina quarterback situation in the league. But yeah, as that hype grows, it definitely kills the my hype for those players because it does, and I love Robert Woods as well, but because I could get him in like the 6th or 7th round, and as my wide receiver 1, especially in super flex leagues, and then
who's the best example of it last year, by the way? Darrell Henderson.
Yes.
Oh my God. He climbed into like round 4, round 3 sometimes.
I have a concern about Cam Akers this year and where he's going, but
at least he's going in the RB2 range. He's what, RB 20, 21 off the board. Ooh.
Anybody remember Bishop Sankey?
That one didn't go great.
No. Who else?
I will say that Akers' competition is Darrell Henderson, who couldn't get on the field, and Malcolm Brown, who's horrendous.
Don't forget John Kelly. Don't you dare. Or is he?
Oh, I like John Kelly. The way to work yourself into my heart is be a running back that breaks tackles, and he did that like nobody's business. He's honestly just missing a little bit of athleticism. Otherwise, he would be I think a big time running back.
Were you there with David Montgomery?
What happened?
Were you there with David Montgomery liking a running back that breaks tackles?
I liked Montgomery. I thought Josh Jacobs was clearly the best back last year. And I understand that one of the things that happens, it seems like every year at Alabama, is every year we need to question their profiles because they don't have the market share or they don't have the touch share or they don't have the volume that top prospects we look for. But then you have to realize that they're only playing with 5-star kids. Like they're all 5-star. Like Alvin Kamara was RB4 at Bama.
Yeah.
It's absurd how many good players they have. And it impacts everything. But I like Kareem Hunt was one of my draft crushes. Obviously, like Saquon Barkley, guys that just have great contact balance. Alvin Kamara was one of them at Tennessee.
Didn't Rashad Penny have pretty good contact balance as well, or was he ever hit
not really, to be honest?
Yeah, he just had giant holes because he played at SDSU and was playing against. I mean, I don't know who, honestly.
It's a Mountain West Conference, but so the Rams are in there. And the Buffs. No, not the Buffs. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, we got off topic here.
Let's round out this team with just talking about Ian Thomas, since we already spoke about OJ Howard.
Well, let's talk about the wide receivers real quick, because I mean that's the strength of this team. But and really, if you think about it, it's almost like you're in the middle of a rebuild, but you're not rebuilding yet, where you have Tyreek Hill, you have AJ Brown, you have DK Metcalf, you have Anthony Miller, James Washington maybe, but you have some very good young wide receivers that you can build around. But everything else is like, why do you need Darren Waller in a no tight end premium, but also on this team? Because you're not doing anything with it. So you definitely, if you don't get 101 and 106 as running backs, obviously 101 is a running back. But if you get, like Eliot said, if I don't think Dobbins is dropping that far, but if he did, praise the Lord. But
you could see, I guess 101 Edwards-Helaire, and then let's just say 102 to 104 is what, Swift, Judy, and Lamb.
That would be wild.
I've actually been in multiple drafts where those are the top.
Really?
4.
So Taylor's just out of the top 5?
Oh, sorry. You're right. That was a brain fart. Taylor.
Yeah.
And
okay. I was like, whoa.
You can get Jonathan Taylor at 105. What?
I apologize, but that's what you need. You need if that's how
the 2 wide receivers.
So we often subscribe to the theory on this podcast. If you're in a team in a circumstance like this, where we probably wouldn't do it with this team because they have the 101 and 106 and 108 and so on and so forth, they can do a lot of rebuilding really quickly when it comes to running backs and be competitive this year. But assuming we didn't have these picks, assuming we had to kind of work with what we had here, Sam just talked about potentially selling Darren Waller. We kind of subscribe to the theory that you have to sell your most prized assets. You have to sell the biggest assets you have for multiple pieces to then go ahead and try to win through the numbers game down the line. AJ Brown's price was going absolutely out of control just a few months ago. I don't know if it's the same way in drafts today, but when people kind of had that AJ Brown fever, his price was astronomical. Assuming you had none of these picks, is this a scenario where you would entertain trading a guy like AJ Brown at the top of his peak, even though you know that this is a young asset that could potentially be that superstar you need down the line?
The answer is yes, right? You can have, right? Like, I don't even know how to, I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, right? Like, if you want to be a good-looking person and your right arm is shredded, but the rest of you looks terrible, like you still look terrible, right? Even though if you have a great right arm, like this is a horrendous comparison. But like that's basically what having one great dynasty asset is. You're never going to be able to win around it. So you need to be able to trade that for multiple assets to try to get better. I helped Ryan Hodge with his dynasty team this year, and he told me, quote, "I traded all the rookie picks because I didn't want to worry about the draft." And I was like, that's not super helpful to me. But his team was Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans, Devontae Parker, and his 5th best player with no rookie picks was Albert Wilson. It's not an exaggeration.
What?
You have to start with tight ends. Ian Thomas was his best tight end. Derek Carr was his best quarterback. This was like rough. Super.
The problem with that is one person gets injured and you're screwed.
Yes. So Christian McCaffrey got traded for 3 first-round picks and Terry McLaurin. And then Alvin Kamara got traded for Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, and a second-round pick.
Yep.
And then Keenan Allen got traded for a first-round pick and a second-round pick. And then all of a sudden, like, my team's not going to be any good this year. And then I tried to get future picks as well, but I was never going to win with that team. You have to recognize, Stompy and I talked about this yesterday, you have to recognize when your team's not good.
Yeah, you have
because
to be honest.
you can rebuild something quickly if you blow up a team and, you know, you sell players at the right price.
I think it's interesting that you bring up AJ Brown, Eitan, because if he is going, and I'm trying to look up the ADP here, but if he's going as high as where people were hyping him, so he's 24th off the board. So I mean, that means you can keep Tyreek Hill, acquire probably a young wide receiver and a pick for either this year or next year with AJ Brown and build around that, because I think, and I think, Eliot, you would agree that he is due for major regression, right?
AJ Brown?
Yeah.
I mean, AJ Brown needs more targets. That's the thing. We saw once they got into the playoffs, they would throw like 11 times. I mean, the same thing happened to George Kittle in San Francisco, right? He was still dominating target share, looking at 23, 24% of the targets.
Yeah,
but they only throw 12 times. I don't care what you can get 50% of the targets. You're not going to dominate in fantasy football. So the system he's in is not good. His long-term upside, especially if Derrick Henry leads the team after this year, could skyrocket.
Yep.
But an opportunity to sell high on any player, like there should never be a player that you're not willing to move, because every player should have a price. They're assets. They're human beings, but on your fantasy football team, they're assets, right? It's just like it's like anything. Like if you have a stock that's worth $400, it might be your most valuable stock, but someone offers you $500 for it, why would you not sell it? Right? I mean, it's the same concept.
And if he doesn't perform where he's going, we say Dynasty is this long-term game, but it's not. I mean, people go through their rosters and turn their rosters over every couple of years with trades and stuff, unless like you're in the worst league in the world. And when AJ Brown I shouldn't say inevitably, but near inevitably does not perform up to his ADP, you're going to see his value drop, because they're going to see Tennessee is built around the run and their defense. They're going to throw the ball maximum 450 times. That's not going to, there's no way that AJ Brown, I mean, he could be a game breaker like Tyreek Hill, but I don't see AJ Brown that way, where he's going to be the yards after catch monster he was last year. Even though he is good at it, he's just not going to keep up. I think it was 8.8 yards after catch per reception. So he's going to probably lose value after you trade him or after the season, if the season happens, and you can buy him back for cheaper. And then you already gained a young wide receiver and a better pick at that point.
I'm not sure if you'd be able to buy him back, because I don't think a lot of people are selling Juju right now, despite, Juju's year.
He's definitely at a cheaper price tag right now than he was.
But I mean, ideally, he's at a cheaper price tag. Realistically, whether or not, if you're speaking with somebody that is an avid Dynasty player that knows what they're doing, whether or not they're going to be interested in that's another story. But yeah, the point is, you always have to understand the value of expectations and understand that the value of the crowd's expectations is often only looking at one half of that, one side of that, the highest end of what could happen to this player. And they're completely ignoring the floor of whatever could happen to this player. So if you're selling at a point that is matching that highest expectation, yes, there is a chance eventually in the long run you could lose out. Eventually this player could become a superstar, but I mean, most times you're going to end up ahead if that's your mindset.
If you sell players at their ceiling price tag, over and over and over again, you will be a winning dynasty player.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I sold CMC twice this offseason, by the way. Sold Patrick Mahomes after his second season too in a super flex. And I've won three times, and so it's over 2 different leagues, but basically 3 times in the first 2 years. That doesn't really make sense in the math. I get it. But the reason I bring up AJ Brown is I like the idea, but really with this team, I would probably sell Tyreek at what his value is. I mean, his value's top.
Are you getting more or less for Tyreek than you would for AJ Brown?
Well, you get
more for
far
Tyreek.
more.
I would say the other interesting thing you could do is, since it's a 1 QB league and QBs are devalued, if you get CEH and you have Tyreek Hill, go out and try to get Patrick Mahomes and just stack the Chiefs offense. And that's your way to try to win weekly, is have those monster Chiefs games.
So it's a little weird in these 1 QB leagues how people value QBs, because to me, probably the only guys that are worth quote unquote first rounders are Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson right now in 1 QB leagues.
Yeah, like 108 for Patrick Mahomes might get accepted.
Yeah, and I mean, really, you could probably trade AJ Brown for Patrick Mahomes and let's say another young wide receiver, and there you go. I mean, you stacked the Chiefs offense, and then you've basically started a rebuild at that point too. Or at least it will compete in 2 years. So I guess I like that idea too. I look at it 2 ways. You either get rid of AJ Brown and try and rebuild within a year, or get rid of Tyreek Hill and understand that AJ Brown probably doesn't perform up to expectations this year, and it'll be a couple year rebuild, not just a 1 year turnaround or try to turn around.
All right, so let's come back to this team, guys. At the end of this, Sam, you know how this goes. Every week, we take the roster, we put it into card terms, and we decide what this roster is from the perspective of a mechanic that doesn't know what they're doing, because that's essentially who me and Sam are on this show, talking about cards. So, Eliot, what we want you to do is talk to us about this roster in card terms. Is this a Cadillac for you? Is this a Maserati? Is this your mama's jalopy? What is this?
Did you guys ever see, I think it's called Employee of the Month, where he's like, yes, this is an 88 Honda. How dare you?
Yeah.
That would be this roster.
I love
it. That's fantastic. I mean, that's kind of in the area I was thinking, and really it's like an 88 Honda, but they tried to pimp the ride and put like a spoiler and one of those like racer mufflers and this weird paint job, but it's still just an 88 Honda. So that's that paint job, and all of the aesthetics are his wide receivers, and everything else this is a 20-plus-year-old car, and it's going to fall apart soon.
Yeah, this is DeLorean. I mean, it looks super futuristic. It could potentially take you back to the future, but it might not also run the next day, you know? It's one of those situations where, again, it's more aesthetically pleasing than it actually is practical, and it's not going to be a roster that's going to get you over the hump now. But like we've all said here, I mean, those picks are kind of your golden ticket to a quick rebuild if you want to make it so. It's just a matter of what direction you decide to go in, or what direction your draft allows you to go in with those picks that you've acquired.
The other thing you could do, the last point is, we didn't mention, is you could trade down from 101.
Yeah.
To 102 or to 103.
Give me Dobbins.
Like, I have no idea what the pick situation is, but you could probably turn 101 into multiple first rounders.
Does Dobbins take over from Mark Ingram before week 8? By week 8?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think it'll switch over to Dobbins being like about halfway through the season. Dobbs will be the lead back.
Is it the same thing with Swift and Carry-On?
No. Well, I mean, that really depends on if Carry-On is actually on the field or not, right? So, I think Aton just like spilled everywhere. Anyway, I mean, the thing with Swift is Kerryon is actually a good running back. It's not like, I mean, Mark Ingram's good, but
Mark Ingram's ancient.
Mark Ingram's ancient.
Yeah, he's old. It's
yeah, like, he is. But he had like his most efficient season last season.
Well, it helps running next to Lamar Jackson.
Yes. So I mean, that's the I mean, he's good, but yeah, like Eliot said, he's old. So this J.K. Dobbins is obviously the successor here, and you would imagine that it switches over. So Gus Edwards, the dream of Gus Edwards is dead, Aton. But yeah, with Kerryon, he's still a young, good running back. He just needs to be healthy. I think DeAndre Swift is better, but I still think it's going to be probably 55-45. I mean, not even 60-40 between the two.
Gus Edwards, Demetrius Harris, Albert Wilson. Why have you heard us so?
Hey, was it the Ford Pinto that had like the gas can in a very bad spot that caused the Pinto to blow up?
Oh crap! I didn't know about that. Was that an actual thing?
I have no idea what you're referencing.
It was back in like the 70s or something. They had like a gigantic recall of the Ford Pinto. 27 deaths were found. I'd have to look into it, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the gas, where the gas tank is, and they had to recall it. And that's what, like, I was just thinking another analogy for this roster is it's like the Ford Pinto 1980s edition or whatever, when things were exploding. So you could drive it and take a chance that you're going to get to where you're going, but at some point you have a very high chance of dying as well. And a little bit dark there, but that's just kind of what this reminded me of.
It's fun. This roster needs Pimp My Ride. That's what this roster needs.
Right? I think that's exactly what it's going to look like, because if you remember all those cars on Pimp My Ride, they were so bad. It was like, we have these aesthetics going here. So it's fine. We can like,
we know how you like the ocean, and therefore we put a fish tank to replace your back seat. It was like, this is really cool once, but I feel like this is not super helpful.
Here, I'm gonna put a TV in an entire video game system, or an inflatable movie.
The one guy got like a pickup truck, and they put a hot tub in the back.
Yeah,
and they make it like purple with like flames on it, and you're like, I'm supposed to drive this thing to work. I'm driving a purple car with flames and a hot tub in the back to my job. Like, this is.
Can you just give me a new car, or a new-ish car? Anyway,
the moral of the story is get some running backs on your team.
Oh, good God. Yeah. So, I mean, you were given a ton of actionable advice there. I would definitely be trading either wide receivers, or I actually like the trading back to like 103, get Dobbins, get another young or another pick, or a young wide receiver. And because you're not going to win this year, and with Dobbins next year, you have a legitimate RB1. So that's the route I think all of us think you should be taking.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be the end of our podcast, the end of this show, the end of episode, whatever it is. Me and Sam stopped counting like 12 episodes ago.
78.
That was close enough. Anyway, let's go ahead and round this out. Again, thank you so much for watching. Sam, before we get out of here, go ahead and let the people know what to do.
No, let's let Eliot go first.
All right, go ahead, Eliot.
Is this where I'm supposed to tell people where to find me?
About FTN,
yes. You're supposed to tell people at FTN right now.
So if our talk about 88 Hondas and Pimp My Ride has not made you close the podcast, I appreciate you. You can follow me on Twitter at Eliot Crist, ELIOT CRIST. Working on 3 websites right now: FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets. We have so much content coming out on a daily basis. Some free, some premium. You can use promo code Eliot, ELIOT, for an additional 5% off the grand opening price. A bunch of tools are out right now. We've got even more coming. By the time the season rolls around, we'll probably have about 20 NFL tools. So we're really pumped for everything we're doing. We're trying to, keep it unique, keep it fun. And, I'd appreciate if you go head over to FTN Fantasy and check it out.
Yes, because goddamn the minds of fantasy football they have over there. Just like, well, that's going to be too much content, I think, but I'm still going to go support it. So go to FTN. I mean, a ton of our friends are over there. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic because Eliot Crist is involved and he's basically in charge. So
he's the man. He's the man, man. What about you, Sam?
Patreon.com/Dynasty or Dino Diagnostic. I apologize. You'll get access to watch this podcast. You can get the podcast early. You can get t-shirts. We can do private podcasts. We actually have a patron who is in a tier where we will do a bi-weekly podcast for their league. So you can get stuff like
Sam
that.
will also make you personal videos of him in a singlet.
Listen, I am Chris Farley at this point of fantasy football. So I'm like the Chris Farley to everybody else's Patrick Swayze, if you know what I'm talking about with SNL. Anyway, and then go to storeenvy.com/FFpod shirts. It's Dynasty Outhouse's shirt store. It's got a bunch of podcasts in there, Superflex Super Show, Trade Addicts podcast, obviously, us. I'm sure there are a couple I'm missing, but get shirts, get stickers, get mugs of your favorite podcasts, and 10% goes to Fantasy Care, so you're also helping a good cause.
Thank you, technicians, for making it to the Dynasty Diagnostic Service Center today. Please be sure to keep up with all your scheduled maintenance and catch us next time to ensure quality performance. See you on your next visit.